consciousness, so I jotted down these names, these words. Edgar Casey, Nostradamus, global warming, Mayan prophecy, apocalypse, space and time, December 21st, 2012, 11/11. And at the very end, my consciousness went dreaming. Somewhere in the middle, I talked about the heart. Pondering everything, your heart begins to swing back towards remembering who you are.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, the veil is being lifted, and supposedly the myths say that this happens every time, every 13,000 years. So this is the time when we learn everything. I don't know if it's a short time and then we start forgetting it again or whatever, but this is that time.
And the stars align, all of the sublime thoughts and subconsciousness become one mind. Tap into the universal mind and see everything wide. It's bigger than you ever thought it could. Pondering everything your heart begins to swing back towards remembering who you are. And the sweat on your brow is rolling, exposing just where it is. We are right now.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Bands of Time. Brian and I have a lot to talk about tonight in a rather short space of time. We're going to try to keep this quick. But just so you know, behind the scenes, Brian has been doing research in other fields that has led us down a road we're going to have to cover tonight, because in light of just exactly what America is, Brian always tries to get to the event horizon in its historical context. So when we think about these things, at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves not only where, not only who, but inevitably the why. And the why might stretch into places where we don't want to go. Consider this, ladies and gentlemen. There's been one thing that Christ, my King, said that has haunted me since I was 9 years old. I remember it very clearly. It was 2 weeks before school was going to start when I was 9. And I looked intimately into what Christ said concerning one phrase, concerning one point in time. Historically, we know what happened in 70 AD with Titus. The invasion began in February, of course, ended in August. Now, perhaps the phrase that I've thought about my whole life is tied to that event, because Christ said a very chilling thing: pray that your flight not be in winter. So, take note, in 70 AD, it was illicitly not in the winter. When we think about those things, when we focus our mind down a path, even when I mentioned this to Brian, he said, it's an anomaly in the text. Why is it there? Why is he referring to the time of year? Why is he referring to what is everybody's unfavorite portion of the sidereal year and the calendar year? Everybody hates winter. So put that in your back pocket, because eventually we have to ask ourselves why people ever did come to America. And Brian, and this has happened to us again on the fly. As I set this call up and did all my testing and let Brian see everything, make sure everything was going correctly. In the preparation phase, which is, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, Brian found iconography that can prove beyond any shadow of a doubt the who. The who is practically not in question anymore. But it makes us, it puts us on edge to Brian and I. We don't understand why God will throw these things out to us at the last minute. He will do it at the last minute, and it has always blown me away. So Brian needs your prayers. He's being pushed into overdrive over the past couple of days. We were supposed to do this 2 days ago, but we live in life. You know, I'm pretty damaged, but people still need me. There's things that need to get done before Christmas. Right now, I've got like at least 4 families, depending on a particular task to be accomplished before winter, or they're not going to have any Christmas. So, in light of that, of course, my hand has taken me out of the equation. So, my sons have stepped into the plate, and they have become my 2 hands. God is good. So, as we delve into this topic, the first thing we have to do is talk about the what. But before we breach said topics, let's get the Bri on the video. And let's talk about this for a minute. Brian, let everybody know how much you've been doing research and how much you've been sleeping. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, he's not feeling too well because he goes into this batter's box and he swings away. And this monumental amount of information will come to him, pouring through all these historical documents, the iconography, because you have to look at the iconography. You can't believe what they're saying. Most times you just have to look at the pictures, the archaeology itself, the script itself, and, you know, please take note the vast heartaches created with this, because people like Sitchin. You have no idea how upset Brian got yesterday, frustrated, because, ladies, it's really historical fiction. You have to understand that the sources that Sitchin is quoting about the Sumerian text, they're fiction. They never existed. They never did. So Brian was pretty upset that one of the resources that we use made reference to a particular topic incorrectly, feeding that lie so it becomes a blaze across the body of Christ. That's not what Brian and I mean at all when we're talking about that. And by the way, the Brian and I did cover at that event, and he only got half of it right. There's 2 proven items of note. So Bri, jump on here and let everybody know how you're doing, and talk about how long you've been studying this topic, and how we're going to look at this biblically speaking, because America, ladies and gentlemen, it is in the Bible source code. It was always there. So Bri, take over, bud.
All right, sorry there, just one moment. I had to set something down. Let's see here. Sleep, huh? Yeah, that's something fleeting. There's been a lot of work here that I've been doing in the last week. The last video that we did had some very major audio issues, which I had to spend a great deal of time trying to get to the bottom of, and basically hope that one of my drivers for a audio device actually worked with me. This new Windows 10 is definitely causing a lot of issues, and I sort of lucked out. Hardware that I have, it worked. Most of my audio recording hardware at this stage of the game is getting outdated. That stuff is pretty expensive. So, luckily, one of the pieces worked. It essentially showed right up, installed the driver instantaneously. I was able to download a 2013 driver that worked. Shocked me altogether. But nonetheless, as Matthew stated, there's been some heavy research I've been working on, and it's rather odd because I am finding myself back in the very same position that I was in when this started. I think around 2012. The initial work on this aspect within finding a link, isochronally speaking, as in history repeating itself, between the birth of Moses, slaughter of the innocent, and a celestial event that could be locked in according to a celestial event that happened at the birth of Christ. Now, I'm hoping to, before the holidays, at least cover part of this, because there's a lot of things going on. I don't know. It's going to meet some initial shock. It's probably going to meet some outrage and some anger. But look, we need to face the facts. There's been some things in the timeline that has been seriously altered. You start to understand the ramifications of how far this goes. Probably going to give you the reaction that it gave me the moment that I realized what was going on. Not going to be. We continually see this thread throughout varied historical documentaries where they are trying to tell you that there is no historical documentation of Christ anywhere in the world. And yet, as we've pointed out time and time again, Roman records are plentiful. There's extensive details, fair amount of text. There are things that have happened where, many a person has looked through, for instance, some of the writings of Josephus, where they discuss Joseph and Mary coming in, the collection of taxes and all that. And a lot of people, kind of scratch their heads going, well, we have a duplicate. We don't have a match in this time frame, this window where we continue to focus our attention. But we do seem to have this exact record of the tax collections at this earlier point in history. And as all things continue, always do, certain aspects continue to perpetuate themselves and continue to be repeated throughout time, which leads to an improper understanding of the timeline. This project actually began at the stage of getting the corrected time, Esther. Locking in the proper king at the time frame that Esther lived, the Ahasuerus whom she was married to, is a crucial piece in putting the timeline together. Now, everybody, we got to understand on top of it too, when we coordinate this with the book of Daniel, we are given a very specific timeline. Now, the unfortunate aspect being, tried to thoroughly bring this to people's attention. I've written a paper up on it that can be found on Matthew's website on the proper understanding of Daniel's 70 weeks. A mindset had started at some stage in time. People got to the understanding or somehow bizarre conclusion that they had to add 7 weeks into the 62. That's not what you're told in the book of Daniel. And I've gotten very frustrated throughout time, and I've had, people that I had locally known at one point in time or another start asking me some questions. And the first thing I brought up, I said, let me ask you this. Did they state 62 or did they state 69? They go, well, of course they stated 69. And I said, of course, throw it in the garbage. These facts have to be ironed out so people have a concrete understanding of why it is that we have been pointing over and over and over again to this point in history. when you stop and consider what it is that we're doing tonight concerning the Americas, okay, we have had multiple cultures throughout the world single out this very portion that we are looking at right now in history. This is not coincidence. This is not chance. This is not just a bunch of weird folks, interspread throughout the world that had no connection with each other, just started making things up. You have these parallel prophecies happening on a continual basis through a multitude of cultures. You have to stop and think. Go back and think about the parallels that we have. Book of Genesis. Every culture worldwide speaking of a world flood. Yet we've had geologists throughout time. We've had very historians and, all kinds of, they're bits of entertainment. I'll just call them what they are. Tried to tell people time and time again, well, there's no evidence for any kind of flood. And yet somehow, on a worldwide basis, the same legend repeats itself over and over and over again. Now we stop and consider on top of it what it is that Graham Hancock is considering. When looking at Göbekli Tepe, when looking at this work that was released by a colleague of his that he posted the paper and then didn't even realize the ramifications of it until something was sort of nagging at him that he needed to immediately go back and look at this. And he realizes that what he was seeing on Göbekli Tepe is no different than this prophecy that is spoken of in the Americas, referring to this window in history. And I do like the fact that Graham went in and pointed out these alignments. It actually is a window. I can't remember the exact figure, if it was 80 or a 60-year window. Nonetheless, he points out that the work of Jenkins, he stands behind. I don't have any problems with work. I do question myself at times, though. How is it the date of 2012 was settled on? But I think it's more in proper context to state that we were looking at a window in time. The Mayan prophecies themselves did not ever state that the world was going to come to an end on that date. They essentially stated as we were moving into a transitional period. And that transitional period was going to have a window of time that was going to be a very dark time. Or as we may understand this, a time of tribulation. Now, I have questioned time and time again, all considering what had transpired following the events of December 21st of 2010, as we had that massive lunar eclipse that took place in Orion that night. That event was what woke me. Thing is when you stop and look at that date and you roll the clock forward, immediately, major events that started a domino effect that have led to where we are sitting at this point in time now. As we moved along, we got into January of that next year, we had the Arab Spring fire up. We had massive revolutions take place all throughout the Middle East. Leaders were dethroned. New leaders were set up. More countries were destabilized. And due to this destabilization that took place, be it if this was through foreign intervention, be it through whatever means, there was all a plethora of things that had led to this. These created power vacuums in each place where these things transpired. Historically speaking, when you look at any form of collapse, these power vacuums always lead shift in power. That when we go back to and look at the Bronze Age collapse, for instance, and even take the clock and reverse it backwards because they were connected to one another. Look at the time that God delivered his people from Egypt at the time of the Exodus. Right after this, we had the Hyksos come into Egypt. We had the Kassite show up in Babylon in the same time window. We had several vacuums that were created in this time. So we know that we can look at these patterns and we can see how that these cycles are repeating themselves. And quite clearly, this is happening today. Now to wrap this back around to what we have going on here with the Americans. It's been stated time and time again, people always have this infamous question, well, where's America in the prophecies? You know, and there's been all kinds of entertaining solutions that people have come up with. I'll give them credit for trying. But nonetheless, even to my surprise, say about the Americas. You know, folks, and this is where I have to point something out very important. Matthew and I just talked about privately. We get into this conception, we get into this mindset that only certain parts of the world are important as far as biblical events are concerned, as far as prophecy, whatever thing we may want to tie this into. You have to stop and think about something first and foremost. God created the entire world, created all the people within it. All these little aspects within history that may at certain points it look like they're somehow not connected, all spread apart, have nothing to do with one another, kind of sloppy. When you're able to get the correct timeline, able to start tying all these events together, begin to see some very important patterns here. You know, Matthew had chosen this picture here that I'm going to pull up for the intro, you know, the little picture that we will put at the beginning of the broadcast. You know, I think it's very important to take note of the fact that Ezekiel 38:11 is brought up here, because in the upcoming weeks with what we're about to reveal here, Ezekiel 38 and 39 are going to become very important. Connection with what they would refer to. They attempt to call this the New World. There is a little bit of a problem with that as far as I'm concerned, because this world has always been here. It is very clear through a plethora of ancient texts that this place had always been known of. Travel had taken place back and forth from this nation multiple times within a major amount of ancient text retained here through the legends of the native people before the Americas was settled. Well, we came into the equation. These legends continually repeat themselves, stating either A, we came across the sea. We had these people that showed up, these tall, blonde-haired, wide beard. Same things repeated time again. Came from across the ocean. These folks that weren't really of the native population kept showing up. Kind of goes back to what we were stating about the flood. Get to the stage where you kind of have to go, none of this is coincidence. And we have been commonly told America's not in the Bible. Guess what, folks? It's time to bring this kicking and screaming into the light. Turn this back over to Matthew.
Yeah, Bri, everything that you brought up is pretty disturbing, just on the surface. It is alarming to think about things like this in their context, ladies and gentlemen, because you've been lied to. Okay, that's just the way it is. You've been lied to. America, as you're going to soon find out, it means the New World. It's what they have turned it around to mean the New World, but Historically speaking, and I'm going to show you the maps. I don't have a problem with it. I'll just show you the original maps from the 1500s that calls this entire side of the planet America. I don't have a problem with telling you the truth and showing you the truth. However, everybody's heard me say this time and time and time again. When the Bible says something, you just have to swallow it. You just have to take it. It doesn't mean if it's good for you. It doesn't mean if it's bad for you. It doesn't mean if it's bad for your mother-in-law. It says what it says. And we're going to show you emphatically that America is what you have been led to believe is the new world. Now, let's just pause for a minute right here. I'm going to show you something. I showed you this visual aid on the last episode. You'll take note that this is the true circle of the earth as it was in the days of Noah. Just look at it. You'll see what lies to the west of the foundation stone. Take a note where everything is at. It's important for you to see it, and you'll take note that I put the correct degrees on this map. Although I do have 360, don't I? You'll take note of where 360 points to the center mass of. So when you think about that and you begin to realize things like this, when you begin to realize, ladies and gentlemen, that you are talking about from 17 degrees latitude all the way to 167, exactly 150 degrees on your globe. However, when you translate that over to 432 degrees as God sees the earth, it becomes a whole lot more enlightening. That's also exactly 10 steps of time, ladies and gentlemen. That is 10 time zones. Exactly. It's exactly 10 time zones. Why did God want us to see 10 steps? Brian and I just recently talked about and referred to the 10 steps of Hezekiah. What it meant, what it caused, in direct correlation to the invasion of the mighty Assyrian Sennacherib and his god Nisroch. Just take note that alphanumerically in the Hebrew, that's the same exact alphanumerical integer. So his name and the name of his god, it is encoded to you that they are the same alphanumerical equation. Let's get to the hard-hitting points, shall we? Let's tackle this. Let's take a look at it, see what we can see. Let's start out with America, of course. We'll do that. Right here, we go straight to the etymology. You'll take note that really, if you're going to call anything America, it should be South America, because that was the first thing that got pegged with the word America. You'll take note that this refers to, on this map, it appears on a small globe with 12 time zones, together with the largest wall map made to date. Ladies and gentlemen, the map of America at the time, April 25th, 1507, the largest wall map ever constructed, and the globe that accompanied it, because they made them together, included 12 time zones. Now, you'll take note, let's switch back here, you'll take note that it was named after an individual, Amerigo Vespucci. You'll take note of the name, and we'll get to the etymology here. It goes to great lengths to show you that it is a Latinized version of Amerigo's name. because America is the feminine form of Americus. Amerigo itself is an Italian form from the medieval Latin Americus. So just take note of that. It was always attributed to, by, and from Amerigo Vespucci. Now, looking here, the New World is one of the names for the Western Hemisphere. Did you catch that? Specifically, then it gives it to you, Americas, including nearby islands, everything on this side of the planet. It says here in this article, the Caribbean and Bermuda, the term originated in the early 16th century after Europeans made landfall in what would later be called the Americas in the Age of Discovery. Now, you'll take note, they come right out and tell you that the term was first coined by Florentine explorer Amerigo Vespucci. What did he say? The Americas were also referred to as the fourth part of the world. It amazes me that Mr. Vespucci knew to refer to this as the last corner of the earth. But we're going to take a look right here, read 'em and weep. It shows you specifically, check south of South America. Do you see what it shows you? It shows you a part that you need to remember. It shows you, of course, Greenland, North America, Central America, South America, and what else? That's right, because when you do your calculations, you, of course, have to include something very important. The Antarctic Peninsula is huge. And on top of that, right now, we'll go ahead and jump over. I'm going to show you how important there the Weddell Sea is and the Antarctic Peninsula. We're just going to go ahead and switch over and show you the meat and potatoes. You will take note that I have marked out, using Google Earth, the destruction zone. When you calculate all the areas that lie within, it is 1/3 the surface of this planet, because everybody forgets to do this. Now, take note, what I have marked here, right there is where the South Pole is going when we go back, just as Christ dictated, back to the days of Noah. Right there it is. You see that it is cradled by the Antarctic Peninsula. But this is a vast swath of land, and when you calculate it and add it into the figures of land mass on this planet, you will see this can only be referring to one thing: 1/3 of his footstool. Unequivocally, that's what he means. Now, a lot of you are probably wondering, if you haven't ever seen this video before, this is the Tropic of Zion right here going through the northern portion of the United States. This is the new equator. You will take note. You can see very plainly what caused the event horizon right there, the Chicxulub impact crater. This, of course, is what I refer to as the Tropic of Golgotha. But this is how our tropics are going to be, and let me answer a few questions. Looking at this, everybody wants to know this. What about Antarctica when we go back to the days of Noah? Ladies and gentlemen, we will be at a 0-degree axis. The sun will never set. Never will it set in our Antarctica, because it's not going to be, you'll see the largest portion is, of course, above the pole. But the South Pole, ladies and gentlemen, northern North Pole, will the sun ever set? It will simply go around the horizon every day. It will never set. We will induce the perfect climate control. Everything you see is going to melt. Now, you'll take note that me and Brian mentioned that earlier, that phrase that has haunted me my whole life. Why did he say, pray your flight? not be in winter. You'll take note that he wasn't questioning the timeline as dictated by the Bible source code itself. No, he only said he didn't know the when of the event. So when you consider all of these things, it brings into stark contrast what exactly God is talking about 1/3 of the earth. And is America important? For this, as detailed on this map right here, you can plainly see it, even though you may not be able to read it. It plainly calls this entire side of the planet America. Now, having swallowed that, we of course need to refer directly to the Bible source code. I will remind everybody what I'm using, the Edito Regia. Let me hover over it so you can see it. It is the Edito Regia, that it is a Stephanus 1550. It is not, even though it says this as or Texas Receptus, that is not what it is. Now you'll take note that this has the variants in it that you can toggle with the A key. If you do, those are the lies. You're going to be misled. So when we refer to the Greco-Bible source code, let's just go straight to the crux of the matter. Revelation chapter 8. And the first sounded, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood. They were thrown to the earth, and 1/3 of the earth was burned up. 1/3 of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. And we can just click through here. It just goes on and on and on. The second angel sounded like a great mountain, burning with fire, was thrown into the sea. And 1/3 of the sea became blood. Okay. I'm so glad that Brian has finally perfected this. Look, will you please look? This red line is the eastern boundary of the shock wave. Here, we'll get up close and personal. This right here is the 17th latitude. All the way from there, all the way to here. Just look, ladies and gentlemen, let me flip it up on top. You'll take note, it is not half, nor can it be. And due to the shock wave induced, where we're going to have an impact point, here, he is plainly telling you what is going on. He's plainly telling you. So, with that in mind, let's just jump down again. And 1/3 of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and 1/3 of the ships were destroyed. Are you getting the point? The third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and fell on 1/3 of the rivers and on the springs of waters. The name of the star is wormwood. 1/3 of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the waters because they were made bitter. We can go on. We can go on. You don't like this one, do you? And the 4 angels who had been prepared for the hour and day and month and year were released so that they would kill a what? 1/3 of mankind. It's literally all over. It's all over the place. When you just take an American Bible, of course, and scroll back, well, how often does God talk about thirds? Is it important? Are you seeing? Oh, ladies and gentlemen, how important is Joseph's third generation from Ephraim? The third month, of course, you've heard me speak about Exodus 19 so many times. Look, he's really trying to point things out to you. What about the prophetic text? Let's get to what everybody always gets excited about. Are you seeing this? I guess my real question is, can you see? How many times have you heard Brian and I refer to the book of Job? Brian mentioned Esther. Remember? Ladies and gentlemen, I can literally go on and on and on. This is massively important because, ladies and gentlemen, how many times have I told you, when you hear Latin, you know you're being lied to, because there is no Latin that is not derived from the Greek. Doesn't exist. Let's take a look, ladies and gentlemen, at ground zero. You saw that this place is right on the event horizon, don't you? I suggest you study it. So when we think about that, we bring up this, is it in the Bible? Of course it is. It always was. It was always in the Bible. Quickest place to go if you got a Strong's is, of course, right here in Matthew chapter 28, verse 14, because right there it is, staring you in the face. You'll take note that G275 is Amerinimus. Ladies and gentlemen, I told you that America is the feminine form because I didn't want you to see the masculine form. This is the masculine form of America. Now, let's take this in steps. Let's really look at this. You have to take note that where this comes from, of course, is Marinuma. But it has a very strange thing. It has a prefix alpha. It has a prefix alpha. Ladies and gentlemen, there's only one alpha in the Bible. Only one. So when we chase this down, and I love how Strong's will do this to you, but you'll see it means without worry, secure. But when you keep breaking it down, it means solitude or to be separated. Keep breaking it down. To divide, to part. Ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly what they've done. You have been told, of course, that the New World, you don't have to study American history. Go study South American history. You'll find out really quick that especially the Catholic Church made sure that that place was established in God's name. Go ask the Mexicans. That place was established in God's name. I don't know why Americans, or those that live in the United States, believe they're special, because they are not. So take note. Even by the continents, Christ has divided this place. And it gets extremely important when you look into the Bible source code, because it's in places you don't actually want it to be. Oh my goodness. The ramifications of everything we're about to talk about is amazing. And just take note, we're going to run across several prefixes associated with this word, Amerinimos. You better pay attention. Ladies and gentlemen, I really do hope that you pay attention. Because America means 1/3 of this planet. It means the New World. And it always did. It always did. So Brian and I is going to be taking a look at every verse where this is in the Greco-Bible source code and come to grips with what it means. Oh, it's no coincidence. I'm going to ask you something right now. Why is it you've never heard this before? Why is that? Just so you know, I'm not special. I was taught this in Sunday school. So I'm not special. Yes, I did take geology in a private institution of higher learning. But I did not discover the things I just showed you. By all means, look up global GDP, see what you can see. By all means, look up global population, see what you... Why don't you look up global land used for agriculture? See what you can see, I dare you. You'll take note, just in the etymology, Brian already brought up that, hey man, this is in Ezekiel 38, a reference to a place that is secure, without walls. Ladies and gentlemen, let's do a little history test, shall we? I hope that you're aware that the New World is the only place on this planet with which cities were not built with walls. No, 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 no. We had evolved since that time. So we built self-sustaining forts. Only the forts had walls, ladies and gentlemen. Brian, I just showed you Detroit, right? You don't know, you're not privy to a private conversation that me and Brian had. You look on that map that we showed you. Right there, they made perfectly plain that that's where the fort was. It's the only thing that had walls, not Detroit. You want me to keep going on and on and on? Why wasn't Washington, D.C. built with walls? Why didn't the French build any cities with walls here? It was only the forts. See, we evolved since then, and if the British attacked the French or vice versa before this continent got divided up, you see, they didn't have to worry about civilian casualties. They'd only attacked up. I'm not, oh, for Pete's sakes, read Last of the Mohicans. When God says something, he's not wasting his breath. He's telling you every single thing from his mouth is what your life is predicated upon. Nothing else. Nothing else. Not oxygen, not food, not warmth. You live by his word alone. That's it. We're getting ready to take a look at his word. And the only thing he could have been referring to is America, is the New World. But now we know the what and the where. Like I said, the question will eventually come into the occasion, why? We don't know the event horizon as far as the history books are concerned. Brian made it perfectly clear that this is his footstool. He made the whole thing lock, stock, and barrel. And by the way, just so you know, okay, Brian made it perfectly clear several minutes ago, this place has always been known as a place of refuge. You see God speaking prophetically to you, a place at peace, unwalled villages. Dare to believe the Bible's true. Nobody else does. 99% of the Christians that you know don't. They don't believe the Bible. Ask them how many millions of years ago the dinosaurs lived. Because if they say a couple of million, they're lying to you. They don't believe the Bible. Ask them if there was a flood. See if they start quoting things like, oh yeah, that was mentioned in other ancient text and that was a local flood. That means you're not talking to someone who believes God's word has been preserved. Oh, it's not only been preserved, it's right in your face, actually. You just saw me bring up my screen and show you how they like to lie about it because they wanted to bury that Geneva Bible. That's why they made up the government authorized version, which is not based on any manuscript. Ladies and gentlemen, whether you like it or not, Christ was using the Septuagint in the synagogue. And everybody knows it. There's not a historian on this planet that don't know that. There's a reason why God did that. There's a reason why Stephanus encoded and hid 2 of the manuscripts that he used to write the Edita Regia. Take note that he didn't make annotations for them in order. He called one Alpha Iota and the other one Alpha Final Sigma. He knew that you would know about 666 and the mark of the beast. And somehow he knew they wouldn't let you see the royal count in the Greek. I did broadcast on this before, showing you plainly that, hey, you need to look for that final sigma because that includes, just like the Hebrew, a royal count, only it's inverted from the Hebrew. When you see the royal count, it's shorter by 194. Because sigma is 200. But the final sigma, that's only 6. Come and see. Why haven't you been told this before? Why? It's important that you know who, what, where, when, why. Brian, I think I've went a little bit long in the tooth. Sorry to cover you up like that, but I think I covered all the necessary points. Oh, let me throw this in here just so everybody can see with this one. You'll take note on the bottom of this map, which hangs up in the schoolroom in my own house. Take a look at the bottom. It tells you the degrees, and it tells you the hours. So you can plainly see that we're talking about 10 hours of time. So, Brian, jump in here and give me a break. If you want to jump right into the a Bible source code, let's do so. If not, cover what's on your mind at present moment.
All right. Mind, present moment. Well, I'm going to show something here. Well, let me go over to Amazon first when I click it over quick. So see what this book. I have this in my possession. This is. Sorry here, folks. Remember how to do odds and ends here. Called the Vinland Map and the Tatar relation. And this is a very interesting little history here that has caused an excruciating amount of controversy. Now, the gist of the story behind this book is one of the missionaries that was sent from Western nations, from Italy, essentially, over into where the Genghis Khan and his remaining empire had existed, was sent over there to attempt a missionary mission, essentially. And manuscript was found a little bit around the same time that the first Vinland map of the Norse saga fame, where it essentially has been stated that the Norse had come to the Americas prior to Columbus. This is spoken of in many of their very documents, this land that they call Vinland. Now, as you can see here, I have a map up of this very specific place that they refer to as Vinland. First, it looks a little bit kind of strange. But if you kind of stop, pull out and look at it a little differently here, you can kind of get the gist of Canada, North American continent, and then obviously you have a fairly distorted variant of the South American continent. All dependent on if these are the islands and so forth that I can see as I look over to my other monitor here and see Matthew's Skype up. This could be representing the islands below. Now, what I find peculiar about this, though, is the very fact alone that this was found attached to the same manuscript. This came from a piece known as the Speculum Historiali, and very large medieval document of a historian at that point in time that was later published under a very huge piece of work that he put out. But nonetheless, there is, what I understand of the story here, as a transfer took place, essentially where a scribe had written all this down, and they cannot figure out why in the world was this map attached to the same document, wherein with the document on top of it, Asia is being pointed out to the section where the Mongols lived. This gets very strange, because when you stop and consider, for one thing, look at the accepted things within anthropology and archaeology and so forth. They will tell you many times that the Americas, well, what happened is they came up through Siberia and they crossed a Iceland bridge, walked into Alaska, and came down into the Americas. Well, the thing being here is this group that they refer to as the Tartar. It was, for one thing, it was a misrepresentation of the name. The reason they called them this is because of the word Tartarus. When the Mongol invaders came in, Hans, you talk about an empire. To this day, there has not been a larger empire on the face of this planet as what was accomplished through Genghis Khan. And yes, everybody, you're used to hearing the name Genghis. Well, Genghis was a distortion that came down through time. They first started out with Genghis, then it went to Genghis. The actual name is Chinggis. For some very odd reason, these two documents were attached to one another. And on that map that I just showed you, there is where they refer to the Norse, called it Vinland, which you can quite clearly see was in the Canadian section. And it's been proven beyond any shadow of a doubt that the Norse did come here prior to Columbus coming to this land. Now, when we get into the Bible source code, there's going to be some things that are going to stand out here. When you speak of Columbus, there is so much controversy surrounding what went on, why he came here, and it does leave you in a position where you're really scratching your head. Theoretically, in one state, is pointed out that the Jews were being kicked out of varied portions of Europe. There were things that were going on with the plague on top of it that had happened going back 100 years after the time of Genghis Khan, where the Mongol Empire took catapults essentially and shot bodies infected with the Black Plague, because this broke out in the steppe regions and into the areas where we consider as China and so forth. That's where the Black Plague originally originated from. They took these bodies, the first basically biological warfare attack that they used, they shot a body over the wall, dropped it right into this area. Well, as Matthew informed me, they also started sending the bodies in boats and all the way across the line. As you went further on down through history, they also began to blame this on the Jews, and then there was slaughter that took place on top of it there. This is where we start getting into the area where, some suspect that Columbus was actually looking for a place of refuge for the Jewish people to come. Yet this is where things get even more interesting. Just one. But yeah, as I transfer back and forth, I'll put up that picture that Matthew did here for the show as I find something, folks, because it's kind of important that we point this out as I go through and explain this. We have talked about this specific find so many times, it is utterly ridiculous. And let's see here. If I knew how to spell it, would make life a lot easier. There we go. And as a matter of fact, I spelled it right. Now that's what's even stranger. Well, wait, let's see. What else do we got here? Okay, this is even better. This is from w.econ.ohio/state.edu. So now we've got a college in the mix. All right. Show folks what I'm talking about here. Okay. The Los Lunas Decalogue Stone. This stone right here, where you can see my cursor hopefully flying around at, has been found in a place in New Mexico called Los Lunas. It is 35 miles south of Albuquerque, and a colleague of ours, Jose, made a trip out there. Very interesting place indeed. Now, if you take note of this stone in front of you, it has been pointed out that there is a form of Paleo-Hebrew that is on this stone. There's controversy as to when this is dated. Some have put it back to about 1000 BC. There's some dates that try to push it forward. There's argumentation that goes on as far as the dating goes. If we lock this into 1000 BC, we end up at the very pivot point in time when Solomon, in that window of time more or less is the more appropriate thing to say, when Solomon, the ships of Tarshish, had been sent out. He had the great copper heist, which transpired in Port Royal of Michigan. It's an island above the northern coast of Michigan. There is an event that transpired there. Once again, as I stated, they call it the Great Copper Heist. A major amount of copper was taken from this mine, and to this day, they cannot explain where it went. There's not enough copper or bronze artifacts that have been found throughout the Americas that can account for this massive amount of copper that just disappeared into thin air. Scott Walter has done some testing on the purity of varied copper that has been found, tracing to the Bronze Age itself. And it has been found that the purity of the copper that was in Port Royal is one and the same as the purity of the copper that was used throughout varied portions in Mediterranean and moving through all the major nations of the Middle East and so forth during the time of the Bronze Age. So you have a very interesting correlation, and this goes back to where I was getting at when you begin to look at the Bible source code, you're going to notice a couple of things that really stand out. One major important point that I want to take note of right now, it says almost as if this land at one point in time was set aside as a place of refuge, a place of escape. And as this stone is sitting here on the screen, staring you right in your eyes, you've got Paleo-Hebrew characters, 216 of them in number. Why is 216 important? Well, Matthew just pointed out again all the measures within the earth. You also have to break it down that the planet itself is 21,600 nautical miles. When we begin to start counting portions within the calendar, tying into all the very astronomical things with precessions of the equinox, we also had the 2,160 year time marker. Again, you've got something very strange going on here as far as the stone is concerned. Now, one thing that had transpired between Matthew and I that kind of took on a personal light, all considering how things happened as we approach this date. There is an astronomical stone here, and I wish I had those pictures offhand. As a matter of fact, the next time Matthew comes in on my other computer, I will try to grab them quick. There's an astronomical event that more or less I would say isochronal because, well, astronomy has the same tendency. That's how the clock works. Time repeats itself. On this astronomical stone that is here at Los Lunas, there's an eclipse that's depicted. Now, they've locked it into one point in time. We also rolled the clock forward another point in time. And I just so happened to be, well, at a place of refuge as we had to flee our homes. Long story, I won't go into it. At Matthew's, that very day, Matthew, to recall what the name of that pillar of cloud, the Israeli conflict that happened with the Palestinians at that point in time had just broken out. Now, oddly enough, I don't know how to put this one, just things kind of slid themselves into place. That very night we happened to meet with one of the very prominent news reporters in Israel. We had quite a discussion afterwards. A little strange when you've got this stone sitting here at this spot. You know, we have these 216 characters and we have this astronomical stone where all of a sudden we can lock it into a date that was at some point in the future as we roll forward and that date comes along, and then lo and behold, this massive conflict breaks out. You begin to scratch your head. Now, not only that, besides the other findings here, because there's also archaeological findings that show that some sort of camp was set up in this area that aligns itself with the way the Hebrew people would have set up a camp at those points as they had been wandering and so forth. It is a direct parallel, one and the same. What's very odd on top of it is found inscribed at this very archaeological site on top of it as well is also a figure that is, well, you're going to see it only in South America, and it's Mayan. I don't know what else to call it. Very strange parallels begin to appear here. There's testing that's going on. Some of this is still inconclusive. There's a lot of argumentation, but there is a probability, and it could be a fairly substantiated possibility that there is Hebrew blood within the Cherokee. We've had, in the lower tips of South America, there have been within, they refer to the area as the Amazon, which is sort of a little odd considering they had, when the first explorers came in there, they thought they had seen the same women as described in Herodotus's accounts as being the Amazon. White-haired blonde people were sighted in the same area. It just gets more interesting by the minute. I've spent so much time diving into this whole entire concept. Well, look, folks, boats. Logic dictates Noah built an ark. So I don't understand, in the back of my mind, I can't comprehend how people cannot put two and two together, knowing full well from all the archaeological findings that sea travel happened at a very early time. Kind of just scratch your head. And I'm going to take a break here for a moment. Matthew, we didn't get the text yet, but get there.
Oh yeah, we'll get there. Let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, that at one point he ordered 24,000 troops. Let me see, do I have my numbers right? He ordered his troops, I think it was 50,000 troops, to kill 24 civilians apiece. It works out to like 1.2 million people this butcher killed in one sortie, just completely annihilating the population. When you think about that, of course, it makes you think about the kings of the East and what that means. So, with that in mind, let's go ahead and jump over to the Bible source code. We'll go ahead and just do that right now. You will see, ladies and gentlemen, I did the search for the word in question, and it comes up numerous times. Of course, you realize that for some strange reason, it's 16 verses, which is 2/3 of a day's hours right now. And then it adds another 8. So combined, of course, it's 24 hours total. He's put this in the Greco-Bible source code. Take note that we're not going to be using the New American Standard Bible for this. We're going to have to use a Greek translation from the Septuagint. So we're going to flip over there and read it from there. Now, you'll take note where it is. Let me get it highlighted for you. It's right here. And it has the prefix dia, which just simply means from. So when we take a read of it, you'll take note that Brian and I have read this verse extremely recently. Cursed be their wrath, for it is willful, and their anger, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Right there, the word you see for divide. That is dia Amerinimos. Ladies and gentlemen, what is the largest stronghold for Jews in the world? Because it's not Israel. It's America, of course. And by America, I mean the fourth part of the world, as the historians refer to it as. I'm referring to the Western Hemisphere. Next, we find it in Leviticus chapter 25 and verse 46. And ye shall distribute them to your children after you, and they shall be to you permanent possessions forever. But of your brethren, the children of Israel, one shall not oppress his brother in labors. This is in use with reference to how the bondman is supposed to be treated. It's the very last verse in that stanza. You'll take note that he makes repeated references in this section, not only to patrimony, but to Egypt, He makes references to so many things prophetically here. It's really quite rattling of the cage when you look at it prophetically. Numbers 32 and verse 18. We will not return to our houses till the children of Israel shall have been distributed, each to his own inheritance. Right there, ladies and gentlemen, you see distributed. Staring you right in the face. This, of course, being Numbers 32. You'll take note where this chapter is at and what it's talking about. Next, we have Numbers 34 and verse 29. It is contained in the last verse, according to the names of the men who shall divide the land. So he's speaking here of who it is that's going to be dividing it. These did the Lord command to distribute the inheritance to the children of Israel in the land of Canaan. Take note, right there in Hebrew, I want to remind you, Canaan is merchants. Deuteronomy 19 and verse 3. Take a survey of thy way, and thou shalt divide the coast of thy land, which the Lord thy God apportions to thee, into 3 parts. There shall be a refuge for every manslayer. This brings into great historical context everything that Brian and I has stated so far. This place was always set up as a place of refuge, and here you have Amerinumos right in front of your face in the Greco-Bible source code. It's right here. Let me ask you something, ladies and gentlemen. You see, you know about the Pilgrims, right? You know which Bible they were reading, right? You realize that they knew Greek, right? I'm just saying. Joshua chapter 13 and verse 14, which is actually a verse and a stanza. Only no inheritance was given to the tribe of Levi. The Lord God of Israel, he is their inheritance. As the Lord said to them, this is the division which Moses made to the children of Israel in the Arab Moab, on the other side of the Jordan, by Jericho. Why is he talking about Levi twice? Because that's how this whole started out. Let's just jump back there really quick. Who is this prophecy referring to? Read verse 5. Simon and Levi, brethren, accomplished the injustice of their cutting off. Let not my soul come into their counsel, and let not mine inward parts contend in their conspiracy. For in their wrath they slew men, and in their passion they hogged the bull. Cursed be their wrath, for it was willful. Right there, willful. Their anger, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob, and scatter them in Israel. Just take note, that's the second time you got Levi, huh? Now, just take note that the Masoretic text has this in chapter 21 and verse 40. 2 verses different. A city and the suburbs round about the city, to all these cities that Joshua ceased dividing the land by their borders. The children of Israel gave a portion to Joshua because of the commandment of the Lord, and gave him the city which he asked. Very important right here, everything that's said. Prophetically, it's letting you know about who's going to be living in this particular place. when God decides to provoke the 10 to burn it to the ground. Judges chapter 5 and verse 30. They will not find him dividing spoil. He will surely be gracious to every man. There are spoils of dyed garments of Sisera, spoils of various dyed garments, dyed embroidered garments. They are all the spoils. Now listen, for his neck. You probably want to take a look at that, ladies and gentlemen. It's very important there in Judges chapter 5 because he's referring to something extremely critical. Here, we have it in a very interesting place. First Chronicles chapter 11 and verse 45. Now, here, you'll take note. Let me switch over so you can really see it. You're looking at the original Greek right now, and you realize that it's, of course, a name that has a prefix on it of a sigma. You might want to look into that. Brian, we have made our way to the Psalms. You want to jump here and take over? Because I know here coming up, there's things that you need to cover. So perhaps it would be more appropriate if you took over.
Yeah, all right.
But if not, that's fine too.
Yep, just a moment. Let me get caught up with where you were at. You were at Psalms 49.
No, I was at Psalm 17, verse 14.
Okay, so we're going into 60, verse 6. Just a moment. Let me...
Yeah, I have not covered Psalm 17, 14 yet.
Double here. All right. Here we got the next one. I've got mine set up so that I just click it between verses here. I guess if I hold over it and hover, you can see the Greek word itself. Once again, it's got that prefix on it, and this is Psalm 60, verse 6. I have it in the English Standard, but you know what? Let's use the good old, well, it's the Breton, technically speaking. I like how things... God has spoken in his holiness. I will rejoice and divide Sycamore, which in English they put that as Shechem, and measure out tents. A bit further here, next verse, Galilee is mine, Manasseh is mine, and Ephraim is the strength of my head. Judah is my king, Moab is the cauldron of my hope. Yeah, that's Edom, folks. I will stretch out my shoe. Philistines have been subjected to me. Who will lead me into the fortified city? Guide me as far as Idumea. Wilt not thou, O God, who has cast us off, and will not thou, O God, go forth with our forces? Give us help from trouble, for vain is deliverance of man. God, will we do valiantly, and he shall bring to naught them that harass us. Say that this is altogether a little bit interesting, especially in context. Well, Edom, sons of Lot. Well, anyways, that's what they want you to believe right now, anyways. Actual Philistines themselves, a little bit of story that would be also known as the... Some of the texts even refer to it straight up the Pelisheth. Ancient times, they were in the sea people. A plethora of excellent historical research has been done. I've actually got a book in my, well, they call it a wish list. Rather ideal that I want to get to at some point here. Nonetheless, we have Moab. Again, as I said, son of Lot. Now we have got Manasseh and Ephraim, and there's a lot of folks that are running around. Matthew brought this up time and time again. Everybody here in America seems to want to be Ephraim. Well, we've seen enough research. Points that Manasseh and Ephraim Some of them went into portions of northern India and Pashtun of a place named Khorasan, very forefront and center right now, all considering the Islamic prophecies concerning the black flags arising from Khorasan. So the world has its eyes on this place right now. And beyond any shadow of a doubt, Pashtun tribes, their name directly translates from the Arabic, our English, as the sons of Joseph. They have not went out of their way to hide who they are. Where it gets a little bit leery and a little bit frightening, the fact that they've also tied them into the most hostile forces within the Taliban. Begins to take things up to a whole. And remember how we talked about those Mongol previously? Find your connections to the Scythian with them as well. Kinds of interesting stuff we're going to be covering in the upcoming week. All ties together. I want everybody to take note of the name of Ashkenaz. You'll find the reference 2 times, at least in the English. I have to sit down and do a little bit of root searching to see what other words we can find that in. Because it's been reported as well that Ashkenaz is also in this mix with Manasseh and Ephraim in Khorasan. And a big portion of the world that they kind of have also forgotten to look at is this whole region going into the steppe areas, going up out through Russia, all the way into China, all kinds of stuff here. Once again, now we kind of get, well, just talked about tents. I can't spend that much time on one verse or we'll never get done here. Psalms 108. Right here in 107.7, or not 0.7, 108 verse 7, sorry. And I guess in the Septuagint that would take us to 107. But as you can see here, I'm hovering over, there's the Greek term again. I will be exalted and will divide Shechem, and will measure out the valley of tents. Huh. Like I thought. Folks, it's an exact repeat. Stating essentially the exact same thing here. I mean, let's go up to the top of this here. Is this not, if I remember correctly, Matthew, I don't even have to probably look. This is a psalm of ascents, is it not? I remember that when I did this study.
You said you didn't even have to look, right?
Nah.
I find that pretty funny.
I've done a whole study on these ascents.
Right, you have. And you're right, this is exactly the same thing repeated. Here talking, let me bring up verse 10. Who will bring me into a fortified city, or who will guide me to where? Oh my goodness. Moab here is referred to a cauldron. The Valley of Tents. You'll take note that he starts this stanza off, of course. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a direct reference to when he stands the earth up. Be thou exalted, O God, above the heavens, and thy glory above all the earth. All the earth, from one vantage point, is, of course, an azimuth map with the foundation stone at its center. That's what it is. If Brian switches over to my screen, you'll see it. I'll show you the picture again. That's what it is. That's what he's talking about. So, ladies and gentlemen, it gets to be off the charts when you look at this prophetically. Why Amérì is here in these verses, right out in broad daylight for you to see. and yet nobody's ever talked about it. Why is that? Take note the last stanza herein. Wilt thou, O God, who hast rejected us, and wilt not thou, O God, go forth with your host? What do you think he's talking about? Give us help from tribulation. What do you think he's referring to? For the vain is the help of man. Through God we shall do violently, and he will bring to naught our enemies. Valiantly there, ladies and gentlemen. What do you think he's talking about? He just gave you the answer to the sixth seal. He's just given you the answer to Isaiah chapter 24. Right?
I just wanted to point out on top of it too, as I was sitting here thinking. Got it right here. Look at that. Look at that. What does that say in the Hebrew, folks? Just flipped it right to it. See that? Pelashet. Rolling. Example. Migratory. In the English, they refer to this as Palestinia, Palestine, Philistia, Philistines. Yes, folks, that Hebrew word is Pelashet. Very important on top of it. They were also one of those folks that ran around with feathered headdresses. We've talked about the feathered headdresses before. You may want to keep in the back of your mind, and yes, I have a detailed list of, chronologically speaking, where they have found each and every representation of these feathered headdresses in the Mediterranean or Middle East. And the first spot that one was found was in Ur of the Chaldees. I will say this, I do find it interesting on top of it that those same depictions show up in Minoan kings, the Xia and Shang dynasties within China, which gets very disturbing as I watched a couple of documentaries last night, and well, discoveries they have made there are like duplicates of something you see in that place they refer to as the New World in South America. And here we have in the exact definition, rolling, i.e., which means example, migratory. Yes, everybody, they were one of the sea people, traveled in boats. Logic dictates you travel in boats. Well, guess what? You're going to end up a few places throughout the world. That's enough there on that one. Ezekiel. And let's bring this back over to Breton before I move into the next set of verses here. Ezekiel 47, verse 21. As I hover over this here again, everybody, you can see the highlighted portion within this word. We have this in verse 21. Let's see here. So you shall divide this land to them, even to the tribes of Israel. And we have a whole lot going on. This is coast to Damascus, Mathi, the habitation of Sanan, which places are above the coast of Ariantis. These are the borders from sea, from the habitation of Anan, the coast of Damascus, and the northern coast, the eastern coast. Below Laurentis and Damascus, the land of Gilead, and the land of Israel and Jordan divides the sea that is east of the city of palm trees. These are the eastern coasts, and the southern, southwestern coasts are from Thaman, the city of palm trees, to the water of Merimoth, Kadam, reaching forth to the Great Sea. This part is the south and southwest. Part of the Great Sea forms a border till one comes opposite the entrance of Emath, as far as the entrance thereof. These are the parts west of it. Everybody notice something here? West of. So you shall divide this land to them, even to the tribes of Israel. Is there a reason that this whole prior paragraph is dealing with seas?
Well,
I have to
Brian,
say so.
let me just jump here for a second. I'm going to say this, then I'm going to step out and get me some coffee. Just give you a heads up. Right. But, ladies and gentlemen, verse 20, I'll read it again. This part of the Great Sea forms a border till one comes opposite the entrance of a mouth, even as far as the entrance thereof. These are the parts west of Emath. What is that, ladies and gentlemen? Don't you hear something there? I hear it very clearly. What I hear is that exit place on your way to Atlantis. Remember the entrance, the pillars of Hercules?
I was hoping you didn't say that. Yeah, folks, did you notice one of those Greek words?
So I'm stepping out for a second, Brian. I'll be right back. I'm just going to fill my coffee up.
I hear you on that one. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be doing that shortly. My turn to take a break. Nonetheless, everybody, you're beginning to see a pattern here, a very important pattern. And as Matthew kind of blatantly pointed out, yeah. Wow, I bet nobody ever told you that that was in the Bible, did they? All kinds of things there if you just know how to look. Yeah, look at that. Let us move forward. Again, next chapter, 48 verse 29. This is encoded 2 times in Ezekiel. Back to back, 47, and then in chapter 48. This is the land which you shall divide by lot. The tribes of Israel, and these are their portions, saith the Lord God. Next chapter we have dimensions of the gates of the city. Here to this. More dimensions. Again. Real interesting when you sit down, especially when you look at the new heaven and the new earth and the dimensions therein described, everybody. Begin to realize it's speaking of the entirety of the planet. You're going to see a mirror here, just as you will in the book of Revelation. That is a whole other huge topic for another. Micah 7 verse 12. Oh boy. Verse 12, and the cities shall be leveled and parted among the Assyrians, and your strong cities shall be parted from Tyre to the river, and from sea to sea, from mountain to mountain. The land shall be utterly desolate, together with them that inhabit it, because of the fruits of doings. You know, rather interesting the wording that Breton used here is chapter headings. Church complaining over small number. Interesting one. Last from me, for I am become as one gathering straw, harvest, and as one gathering grape gleanings in the vintage, when there is no cluster for me to eat first ripe fruit. Alas, my soul, for the godly is perished from the earth. There is none among men that orders his way aright. They all quarrel, even to blood. They grievously afflict everyone his neighbor. They prepare their hands for mischief. The prince asks a reward, and the judge speaks flattering words. It is a desire of their soul. Therefore I will take away their goods as a devouring moth, as one who acts by rigid rule in a day of visitation. Woe! Woe! Thy times of vengeance are come. Now shall be their lamentations. Trust not in friends, and confide not in guides. Beware of thy wife, so as to not to commit anything to her. For the son dishonors his father. Daughter will rise up against her mother. Daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Those in his house shall be all a man's enemies. But I will look to the Lord. I will wait upon God my Savior. My God will hearken to me. I'm hoping everybody just recognizes what just transpired here from verses 5 through 7. You should all recognize this from the Gospels, or from the word of our Lord, which I would prefer to say. What was supposed to happen? Those of our own household shall rise up against us. How much are we seeing this in the modern Western church here in America? Why is it that we're seeing it here? Rather astonishing when you realize that this root is here. Micah 7 verse 12. As a matter of fact, look at that. It's 2 times in the same verse. Why is that? Rejoice not against me, my enemy, for I have fallen, yet shall arise. For though I should sit in darkness, the Lord shall be a light to me. And I will bear the indignation of the Lord, because I have sinned against him, till he make good my cause. He shall also maintain my right, and shall bring me out to the light. I shall behold his righteousness, and she that is mine enemy shall see it, and shall clothe herself with shame, who says, Where is the Lord thy God? My eyes shall look upon her. Now she shall be as for trampling as a mire in the ways. It is the day making of brick. That day shall be thine utter destruction. That day shall utterly abolish thine ordinances. And thy cities shall be leveled and parted among the Assyrians. Thy strong cities shall be parted from Tyre to the river, and from sea to sea, and mountain to mountain. The land shall utterly be desolate together with them that inhabit it. This is the fruit of their doings.
Off the charts, Bri.
I would have to say that's a bit of an understatement.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you realize here the she, who that's in reference to. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a discourse. This stanza right here can only be talking about one specific group. That's Primus Resurrexere. It literally can't be talking about anything else. And you see that the instigator for all of this is, of course, the Lord's axe, the Assyrian. We have this played out through the entirety of Scripture, but that's just a little point I wanted to bring up there, Brian. Why is it in verse 12 twice in reference to the Assyrians? I mean, Brian, he's making himself perfectly clear. He's talking about the time of the great harlot. And it's amazing to me that most prophecy teachers never even touch this with a 10-foot pole. Now, just take note, ladies and gentlemen. It said that I should sit in darkness, the Lord shall be a light to me. That can only be reference surrounding these events to, of course, avarice. It's got to be talking about Goshen. It's got to be. Well, the very next stanza, ladies and gentlemen, the very next stanza. When time goes topsy-turvy surrounding this very event, where does the woman get taken? She gets taken to a place that's been prepared for her by God. It's, Brian, this chapter is the timeline. It is prophecy. In so many different ways, it's absolutely mind-boggling.
It's an absolute mirror. And the fact alone that, it's bothersome to me that I even had to stop and point out the fact, look, folks, right here in broad daylight, those of your own household shall rise up against you. Let me be very apparently clear on this one again. Only within the Western world are you seeing the shenanigans
That's right.
that are taking place. And what I don't know what to call these places. They are not churches, folks. It's really turned into a circus sideshow at this stage of the game. And I'm not referring to all of them, everybody. There's still good churches out there. There are still good God-fearing men. There are still decent places. Unfortunately, where I live, I'm not aware of any. That doesn't mean that there's not good ones out there.
Amen.
Just man, oh man. And I mean, look, on top of it, everybody, from sea to sea, mountain to mountain, sea to sea, mountain to mountain. Let us not forget that the valleys, the mountains are going to be brought low, the valleys will be brought high. Just too much going on here in this chapter. And they've got everybody looking to this other event. Very beginning stanza. You can see right here, gathering straw in harvest, great gleanings in the vintage, where there is no cluster for me to eat the first ripe fruit. Once again, well, you can clearly see it within Revelation. Right as that sixth seal is broken. Matthew referred to the Acts. Something has just come to our attention in the last couple of days here within my historical work. We also have the flail.
Lord have mercy. You're going to bring that up.
It's going to come up here, and hopefully before the holidays completely arise, because I'd like to shed a little bit of light on, well, something rather shocking that we have stumbled across here as of lately.
And let me say this, ladies and gentlemen, that this is very archaic as well. I have thought about the flail for a very long time. I did not truly understand who it could be. And sometimes I need to be ashamed because, well, Brian covered it. I mean, what this group of individuals did by far outweighs what Alexander the Great ever did, or anyone else as far as that's concerned. And they were the bloodiest lot. I mean, they were bloody. There's only one problem. You know, I mentioned it to Brian. I said, well, I know what chapter that's in. I said, I don't remember where else it's at, but it's going to be there. And I've looked at it for a long time.
Well, and as I told you privately last night, we had done a program. We're going through the book of Revelation. Prior to my prep for that program that night, for some reason I fixated on the threshing floor. The results of that study did not come out that night, as they were not meant to. As we roll forward to now, it is very understandable as to why. Matthew right here, and I've got the picture up again, and right here you've got Ezekiel 38, and it's 39, and let's get something clear here real quick, people, because you're going to get confused if you don't understand this. Many of the prophecy teachers are going around saying that Ezekiel 38 is the first event. That's not how it works, and we had a rather entertaining discussion on this when I had first gotten together with Matthew, and we had quite a few of us here, and Matthew gave us a little bit of a puzzle or a quiz to work with. Rather alarming that I kind of figured out the riddle before we went on air, and I held it back till its appropriate time. But you got to understand something here. The events of Ezekiel 39 is the first event. Ezekiel 38 transpires next, after the 1,000-year reign. There's a little key in Ezekiel 38 speaking of the land, at the navel, at the midst, at the center of the world. That being Jerusalem. I hope everybody understands that dating back to the ancientest of times, where the Temple Mount sits, that capstone, there's something very interesting there that I was not even aware of. There's an ancient megalith under there, at this place that they call the navel of the world. And I had stumbled on a little portion of it at one point in time and never looked deeper. The ancient world knew that Jerusalem was at the center of the world, at the heart. Ancient T&O maps of the Middle Ages. Matthew had pointed out an ancient Babylonian map. Okay, folks, they want to make you think nobody ever knew about this place. But as you sit down and begin to study geography and cartography, you're going to start noticing some very odd anomalies.
Well, just like the anomaly that you showed us earlier. They call this island Vinland when you can plainly see how they got to that copper, because right there it shows you the Great Lakes.
Well, and this is important to point out who it was that came over here, everybody. We just had within these texts, when we went back to Psalms, we had Tyre mentioned. Okay, everybody, they found the same Phoenician script stating that they were the ships that were sent from Tarshish. Man signed it, Mr. Me, who is from Tyre. Okay, they found this documentation written on stone all over the United States. Now they fight tooth and nail about this within the archaeological circles here in the Americas. The academics get so fired up, and yet you still have a stark problem staring you right in the face. Let me ask a question, folks. Why is it that in Lake Titicaca, South America, that they have found Assyrian artifacts? Anybody care to explain that to me? I can go for days on end with this one. Why is it that the Mayan have elephants depicted? You ever get the funny feeling? I know I do. They don't want you to see things when they were always there.
Always. Always.
And I got you on camera, Matthew, so no doing funny things.
I'm not very good at doing funny things, Brian.
Oh, I beg to differ. The show we did the night where you were talking about the vilification. No, this is helpful. Then you go back to you. And this is not. I didn't catch that the first time around until I watched the video and I about lost it. That was classic.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that I'm also useful for entertainment purposes. Ladies and gentlemen.
And now Tiana's giggling.
Oh, I bet she is. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're discussing right here is absolutely world-changing. It's world-changing to you personally. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no way the Mayans depicted elephants, but I'm sorry, they did. And you just have to swallow it. You just, it's true. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry that when the Lord your God tells you about 1/3 of the planet, he's only talking about one thing. I mean, just one thing. You know, we didn't finish reading that. I mean, the rest of that chapter is flat off the charts, prophetically, and it pertains to you. What was Christ referring to in Matthew 24? Because, well, the preterists are very good at their documentation of historical facts. And this remains. Christ was not referring to Titus, nor the invasion and the desolation that occurred in 70 AD. Look it up. The invasion was from February to August. Brian, what verse did you stop in there in Micah chapter 7? You stopped in 13, correct? I will finish the matter. Tend thy people with thy rod, the sheep of thine inheritance, those that inhabit by themselves the thicket in the midst of Carmel. They shall feed in the land of Bashan, in the land of Gilead, as in the days of old. Ladies and gentlemen, is he referring to the days of Noah? And according to the days of thy departure out of where? What does Revelation say that you are? That's right, out of Egypt. You shall see marvelous things. This in reference to the Hebraically speaking, his wonders, in reference only to the Exodus event. The nations shall see and be ashamed, and at all their might they shall lay their hands upon their mouth, their ears shall be deafened. They shall lick the dust as serpents. Ah, yes. Isaiah 24's snare, when they're kicked off Jacob's ladder, and Michael prevents them from going back up. Crawling on the earth, they shall be confounded in their holes. They shall be amazed at the Lord our God, and will be afraid of thee. Who is a God like thee? canceling iniquities. You need to look at that in the Greek, ladies and gentlemen, that phrase there for canceling iniquities and passing over the sins of the remnant of his inheritance. And he has not kept his anger for a testimony. Yes, that is in direct relation to those who hold to the law and to the testimony. For he delights in mercy. He will return, referring to God, referring to, of course, Isaiah chapter 24, this very chapter, referring to the sixth seal event, when time goes topsy-turvy. He will return and have mercy upon us. He will sink our iniquities. What a very particular phrase in the Greek. And they shall be cast into the depth of the sea, even all our sins. He shall give blessing truly to Jacob and mercy to Abraham, as thou swearest to our fathers, according to the former days. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know the timeline, if you don't understand it, I suggest you search out Prophetico on Pinterest and look at the timeline. That's it. Me and Brian just talked about every point on those timelines. They're true. They're real. They're bulletproof. Doesn't matter what book I go to. I can go to Judges. I can go to Deuteronomy. I can go to Exodus. I could go to Joel. All scriptures prove those timelines. That's what God said. Because God chases after that which has been. You just have to believe it. You just have to. That's what God says. There's nothing new under the sun. That which has been is that which will be. He tells you that those who teach you biblical eschatology, if they refer to a historist point of view, they're wrong. That's not what God says. If they try to teach you a futurist timeline, that's not what God said. He said that eschatology is isochronal. Now, with that in mind, we need to move along, because he's going to put this at the beginning of one of the most prophetic chapters that most eschatology experts talk about. They haven't told you that it starts out with Amerinimos. They haven't told you that it starts out with the word that it does. Bri, back to you. Let's read about the coming of his kingdom, shall we?
Most definitely, and this is just it, folks. Over the many, discussions I should have had nothing to do. I would have to call them debates, being what they are, and I've always heard the infamous, no man knows the day nor the hour, and I always went, oh, you mean Zechariah 14. Silence. Understand how it is that I'd say that, and I would not get any response. Right here, Zechariah 14, as Matthew pointed out at the very beginning. Again, so I can hover. I'm hoping the hovering at least comes in. You can see it as part of this very Greek. And since I'm Greek, trying. Zechariah 14, behold, the days of the Lord come. Thy spoils shall be divided in thee. And I will gather all the Gentiles to Jerusalem to war. The city shall be taken, and the houses plundered, and the women ravished, and half of the city shall go forth into captivity. Rest of my people shall not utterly be cut off from the city. Everybody noticed something here, and he even just very so nicely. I assume Mr. Breton put these chapter headings in. Coming of Christ, graces of his kingdom. And the Lord shall go forth and fight with those Gentiles as when he fought in the day of war. And his feet shall stand in that day of the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall be cleaved asunder, half of it towards the east and the west, a very great division. Half of the mountain shall lean to the north, and half to the south. And the valley of my mountains shall be closed up, and the valley of mountains shall be joined unto Jasad, and shall be blocked up as it was blocked up in the days of the earthquake, in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. The Lord my God shall come, and all the saints with him. It shall come to pass on that day that there shall be no light, and there shall be for one day cold and frost. Everybody catch that? Man, oh man, Matthew, we're going to have to redo that show and video. Cold and frost, winter.
Right, winter. But you can't. It's staring you right in the face. It's staring you right in the face, but you take note that you can't get that in Hebrew, Bri. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you're only getting half of what's coming out of his mouth. This is what the Hebrew says. It'll be a unique day. Okay? And yes, the Hebrew's true. And yes, the Septuagint is true because it's a binary code. I don't want to get too far into that now. Brian, back to you. But it's just off the charts what he just said. Right there. In the Greco-Bible source code. Right there in the Septuagint. If you would have just been able to have both your eyes open, you would have read it in Hebrew, read it in Greek, and would have hit you like a ton of bricks, Bri. Amen?
Amen.
Go ahead.
Transferred. I don't even know if I had that on my Bible, but luckily you've got it up as well here, so I'm going to back over to mine. And, my goodness, everyone. Let's keep going here. This is, like I said, this is where I get bothered in those discourses that I refuse to have a part of any longer. I bring this up. Silence. Nobody recognized what happens here in Zechariah 14. This shall be the overthrow with which the Lord will smite all the nations. As many as have fought against Jerusalem, their flesh shall consume away while they are standing upon their feet. And their eyes shall melt out of their holes, and their tongues shall consume away in their mouth. And there shall be in that day a great panic from the Lord upon them, and they shall lay hold, every man of the hand of his neighbor. His hand shall be clasped, and of his neighbor. Judah also shall fight in Jerusalem, and God shall gather the strength of all the nations round about, gold and silver and apparel in great abundance. This shall be the overthrow of the horses and mules and camels and donkeys and all of the beasts that are in those camps according to his overthrow. And it shall come to pass, whosoever shall be left of all the nations that come against Jerusalem shall even come up every to the worship of the King, the Lord Almighty, and keep the Feast of Tabernacles. And it shall come to pass that whosoever of all the families of the earth shall not come up to Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord Almighty, even these shall be added to the others. The family of Egypt shall not go up or come, then upon them shall be the overthrow, which the Lord shall smite all the nations. Whichever of them shall not come up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles shall be the sin of Egypt, and the sin of all the nations. Whosoever shall not come up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. In that day there shall be upon the bridle of every horse holiness to the Lord Almighty. The cauldrons in the house of the Lord shall be as a bowl before the altar, and every pot in Jerusalem and Judah shall be holy in the Lord Almighty. All the sacrifice shall come, take of them, and shall seethe meat in them. In that day there shall be no more the Canaanite in the house of the Lord Almighty. Let me double check that to make sure I translated that correct. Really? Sorry about that.
Remember, Brian, this is a direct reference here. You have Canaanite again, which
shall no longer be a traitor, is what they put in the English.
Right.
Real interesting.
No more pyramid scheme, because, ladies and gentlemen, don't you realize who's going to execute verses 16 through 21? Brian, remind everybody who it is that rules and reigns with Christ. Who does that?
Exactly.
That's Primus Resurrexorant. He just literally told you that they will have the power of the princes. And they're not going to tolerate a pyramid scheme. It's amazing what's going on here.
Well, this goes back on top of it to our discourse, and that's essentially what you were trying to get through to us is, well, then how is it that 38 can be before 39? Don't you get the impression here that at that point in time, scheme is not going to be tolerated?
Right, exactly.
You know, and this is the thing, and I even talked to my friends overseas that, well, I don't know what any of their beliefs are. I think that's all at the end of the day kind of a mute point because of the fact that, look, I can talk to them, I can talk to New Agers, bring up the very same thing. Anybody that has a wee bit of common sense at this stage in time knows that things have went into absolute chaos. You know, and I find the terminology very interesting, especially when you bring up that word Canaanite, because everybody understands the whole connotation of how they became also known through the Greek as the Phoenicians. Transfers to Phoenix. That mythology speaks of rising from the ashes. Why would that be important? Well, let's go back to hear what the results. As I stated before, it was a time of transition. Things were going to be rough. As I put to my friend in Australia one night, as I told him, well, it all works itself out. Everything stands itself up right. The exact moral of the story, and he goes, exactly. Now, I find it interesting that I can talk to somebody overseas that's not educated in these things, and he understands precisely what I'm talking about. Yet I try to talk to somebody here locally that is being fed nothing but milk on a continual basis and complains about it, how it is that they can't understand this. How is it that I speak with a New Ager? And once again, they understand. I get asked, well, what is the moral of this whole story? Everything's going to be made right. They like that outcome. Let me ask you in this moment, what is it that you're hoping in? I have people that have gotten angry with me progressing forward from 2010 because I made them realize the Lord is coming back quickly. And what they did is exactly what it states will happen Revelation 12, as we have two groups of people. One is taken to the wilderness because they love not their lives, even when faced with death. Yet there is one more group, becomes very apparent what they loved. They will have to face the beast. So when I get asked questions, specific here locally, and if you people here locally are watching me, sorry. I've tried to point this out to you. Stop attempting to buy these things from these merchants that are trying to sell you things to survive through the last days. If you're worried about that, if you're worried about what it is that you're going to eat when you have to get the mark of the beast to buy and sell, it's time for a wake-up call.
Amen. If you're thinking about such things, well, I'm sorry. You're a Canaanite. That's what it means. Merchant. You need a wake-up call, for real.
I mean, that was the thing that caught my alarm, folks. There has been a little teaching floating around out there talking about this little pattern, and it really disturbed me that every single time I saw one of these teachings from this certain person, I won't name names, I don't like doing that. But what I don't like seeing is these whole lead-ins of, well, this, that, and the other thing is going to happen, and then right afterwards, buy 70 years worth of food for $3,500 donation to our ministry. Man, oh man. And don't come to me asking about buying the dinar. If you want to buy your dinars, well, ISIS has minted them. I know what you're worried about. Better read Isaiah 24 again.
They're not ministers, they're merchants. You're not donating $3,500 to their ministry. They're merchants. Can't you see that? For the love of the Lord Jesus Christ, can't you see that? All right, we're getting long in the tooth. I'm going to go through those that are in the New Testament.
Yep, and tell me where you're going, because you're doing the typical of what do you call it? Blurry. So send me to the chapter. The next one is, that's just it. All those are so very important, and I found it interesting that people, I came up in discussion, well, can we teach all these things as well from the Old Testament? Oh, you bet your bottom dollar.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that was equivocal proof. Oops. Yeah, I guess the LXX English won't work for that trend.
Right. Well,
Hold on.
I showed you how to do it, but you've forgotten. Just switch over to my screen.
No. I've got everything the way I need it. That's
Okay.
not the problem. I've got it there. I just
I'm just going to read it out of the...
Yeah, yours is clear now for some odd reason, but hey, that works for me, man.
All right. We're going to go through these really quickly. I will lightly maybe give some discourse, but the Brian and I is already 20 minutes past 2 hours. So this is going a little long in the tooth, and I know people are going to complain. And you know what? If you're going to complain, there's tons of merchants out there that you can just pay for their premium service and go watch their videos. I mean, knock yourself out. This is in the New Testament Greco-Bible source code, which is the Didoregia, written by Stephanus in 1550, utilizing the two witnesses of two secret manuscripts which he refused to tell both the church and the governing authorities where they came from and who gave them to him. Matthew chapter 28, verse 14. And if this should come to the governor's ears, we will win him over and keep you out of trouble. Take note what it says about this verse. And they took the money and did as they had been instructed. And this story is widely spread among the Jews and is to this day. I say no more. Luke chapter 11 and verse 17. But he knew their thoughts and said to them, any kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, and the house divided itself falls. Luke chapter 12 and verse 51. Do you suppose that I came to grant peace to the earth? I tell you no, but rather division. And verse 53. They will be divided, father against son, and son against father, mother against daughter, and daughter against mother, mother-in-law against daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. Brian's already mentioned that lightly. Luke chapter 22 and verse 17. And when he had taken a cup and given thanks, he said, take this, share it among yourselves. Luke 23 and verse 34. But Jesus was saying, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And they cast lots, dividing up his garments among themselves. Acts the 2nd chapter and verse 3. And there appeared to them tongues of fire, distributing themselves. They rested on each one of them. 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and verse 32 is the final time Amerimos is in the scripture. But I want you to be free from concern. One who is unmarried is concerned about things of the Lord, how he may please the Lord. Of course, this is in direct reference to the 5 wise virgins. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you got the gist of this study. I really do. I hope you realize now we have a little bit more tidbits. There's something else involved with who it is, we're told, that strikes the axe down. We're given what seems to be a weather report from Christ himself. Ah, yes, the kings of the East. But they weren't the only ones from the East. Nope. That's fact. Right, let's go ahead and finish this up. It's getting a little long in the tooth. We've certainly made our point. By the way, all irrefutable points. Irrefutable points, by the way. Historically speaking, just go to the Smithsonian Institute. I mean, they'll prove everything that Brian and I just said. Well, without a problem, by the way. So, Brian, back to you. Your final comments and or edification, shall we say.
Altogether rather interesting, considering where it is that you left off. I don't even think we were aware of the ramifications with the plan to do this teaching and where it is that it leaves off Kings of the East. You know, there's discoveries that have been made that it seems to me almost intentionally were not discovered until this point in. Last night I watched one more documentary. This is something we haven't talked about yet. Once you understand and realize what they have found in the steppe region, quite literally blow your mind. We had events that transpired during World War II. Where somebody was trying to track down a race. And for some reason, it failed until now. This documentary I was watching last night in the steppes region in the desert. They say hi to my wife as she walks by. She waves. Typical. Classic. Nonetheless. They finally find this portion in the steppes that they were trying to locate. As they were there, within that very night, suddenly a windstorm comes along. Lo and behold, uncovers an entire burial ground. What they discovered in this steppe region is literally enough to blow your mind. Kings of the East become very important here. Correcting this timeline all ties in with this. The gist of what we're going to be doing in these upcoming programs here is discussing the ramifications of time of year everybody focuses on a couple of very important things. What was the quote-unquote Star of Bethlehem? Were the Magi. We've inherited thoughts, teachings, as time has went along as to who these infamous people were and what this sign happened to be. Yet, due to the evidence that's been uncovered here just within the last, tracing back maybe to even within 10 years here, this changed the entire landscape of our understanding. There's a lot more going on here than meets the eye. And have these references, biblical text that is pointing you to these points in time that we quite clearly had in Zechariah 14. That's when Christ comes back. He comes down and he breaks, cleaves asunder the Mount of Olives. So much division and strife going on over this one doctrine that floats around out there. Now, logic dictates after a while, when something has been fought about so much, A, move yourself from that. Not to be caught in those things. Secondly, when there's so much fighting about one little thing, that maybe tells you it's time to sit back and re-examine what's going on here. Zechariah 14 was very specific. Everybody, do you think that when Christ comes back, he's coming back with a big smile on his face? He's coming back ticked off. If there was not an event to seize those whom are left alive, they would be nuked as he comes back and breaks and cleaves asunder the Mount of Olives. Back to what I said before. Where's your concerns at right now? Are you watching the stock markets, seeing about if everything's going to fall apart and you're going to lose all your precious money? Is your hope retirement? Or are you looking forward to the day he comes back? Look, folks, you can see looking right behind me here. This is what we have. We're doing these video presentations. I've essentially jerry-rigged things together. Does it bother me? Or am I glad for what I do have? The thing is my redemption nor my hope does not lie books that are sitting here in this table. I got my cat carrier over to the side here. Where's your focus, folks? Are you looking for his return? Or are you looking for your tax return? Are you trying to stock up perishable items or unperishable items that have been deep freezed and who knows what else so that you can survive 7 years of tribulation? Man, oh man, they got you right where they want you. I think I've said what I need to say. America's definitely here in prophecy. Once again, like all the other little puzzle pieces out there, why has this not been spoken of before? Let me hand this back over to Matthew for a second here, because I'm sure he wants to add in some things to what I just said there.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you know, the WHO. We had expansion. We know from the people that inhabited the East. Brian is going to be presenting to you probably sometime at a later date the mummies that they found. It's off the charts. It's absolutely off the charts.
Well, and as I said, Matthew, they were sitting there literally the day they got there. All of a sudden, lo and behold, a storm comes in and uncovers it. I mean, quite literally, it hit me at this stage in time. Look, this was veiled for a reason until now. It's enough to blow your mind.
And the watchers should have been waiting for it. I said that to say this. It's right in front of your face, the why. Why they come to the fourth part of the world. Why they come to the New World. Why they call this America, these people from the East. That's why Christ said that. Pray your flight not be in the winter. The why was right in front of our face the whole time. Now, it amazes me how Brian sends me the documentation about these mummies. He sends me the documentation giving handwritten accounts, description of the Khan. And the historians of the West turn around and say, well, those were just fabrications. I am sick to high heaven of that. I really am.
Well, explain this to me, too. How is it that they were wearing, my goodness, when they called them the witches? Because of the big, huge, pointy hats they were wearing.
That's right.
For Pete's sakes, folks.
Look, ladies and gentlemen, I'm tired of it. Look, the Maya drew elephants. They weren't having out-of-body experiences and taking a vacation in India.
And yeah, we had discussed this on top of it. I've been working with the Harappan civilization, what they refer to, some of them refer to it as their Dravidian. I've spoken in depth about Sheba and Sabians previously. It's something I've had to consider for a very long time here. Which Sheba are they speaking of? Because it comes up multiple times. The Greek made it very plain. Sabians of Sheba were descended from Cush. And they found this genetic line within the Asian people as well. when you begin to realize, as I did last night, this man that wrote this work on the Harappan, on the Dravidian, he brought up something that I found very astonishing. That there was proof that they traced there to the Xia and the Shang dynasties. Now, being as things are within Chinese civilization, obviously we have new rulership since ancient times. Archaeology has gone about the way they don't want to look at the fact that maybe other people that were not quote-unquote the native Chinese people had been there at a different point in time. Hey, you know, I guess I respect that. They have a strong affinity for their own people, and that's completely understandable. What does strike me is the fact that you cannot obtain any of the evidence that would point towards the work that this man did. But there is such a thing as pictures are worth 1,000 words. I watched 2 documentaries back to back last night with the Xia and the Shang dynasties. They brought forward the varied findings in these different cities that had cropped up around these time frames. We had the Shang dynasty, or I guess they would say it as the Shang dynasty, that came to power 1600s, 1607. It was 80 years prior to the birth of Moses. I've talked about this in depth on my webpage, The Bands of Time, where there was an appearance before this dynasty came to power of 10 suns in the sky. I have the documentation in that work where archaeologists have found that some kind of dramatic celestial event had taken place. Plague broke out. Great many things happened here at this point in time. The Shang dynasty itself came into power, and this is where the man that does the work on tracing the Dravidian, the Harappan people as they made their way up into Asia as well, where he states emphatically that that was them. Look at the pieces that are within the Xia dynasty, take it back to back with the Shang dynasty. Look at the bronze works that they've found, and it's really making me scratch my head here now, wondering who it was that was actually the first masters in bronze. Because that civilization was literally off the charts. Xia dynasty, they found a city that had megaliths that were set up in such a perfect way that every single portion of the seasons of the sun marked off the next sections. This allowed them to have power over the people so they could get them to have a place where they knew where they had to plant. They knew where the seasons were coming along. Rebelled against this. Mass graves continue to keep seeing this very same parallel play itself out in another part of the world. As I had pointed out, though, it's when you look at the findings that they have found from these dynasties. You look at these bronze works, you look at these statues. When you understand the ramifications that the Dravidian people of Tamil Nadu to this day, have a treatise that they call the Mayan treatise on astronomy. Also find out that that word Maya has connotations within India. One of those pieces of that terminology also applies to Magi. When you go over to the Xia and the Shang dynasty and you see statues that they have found in the ground that you're only going to see in one other portion of the world as an exact duplicate in South America, portion of the Americas, really start to ask some questions. People have led you to believe that they did not know of the New World, even though the proof beyond any shadow of a doubt is on a continual basis there. You've been told time and time again that America's not in the Bible. It's not in prophecy. And yet we just emphatically showed you in the Greek that it is. You get to the point maybe where I've gotten quite a few times, get a little bit disgusted. Yet then again, you got to come to the stark realization, like I did last night, that there were certain things that were hidden for a reason, that were veiled and covered until this point in history. When you have mummies that are suddenly found in the steppe regions, going from mountains of Turkey into what they call the Silk Road. All of a sudden, lo and behold, they find these 6'6", blonde-haired, blue-eyed mummies all over the place. Carbon dating them to around, even some of them to 2000 BC. Would anybody care to explain to me why it is that last night I'm going through a work on Genghis Khan? 1200 AD. His empire was above and beyond anything that any conqueror known previous to him had ever inhabited. Why is it when I'm reading through this last night, all of a sudden I see in there a reference? It takes me completely off guard, because the first reference, well, according to their own legends, their original forefathers were tall, blonde hair and blue eyes. What? Then as I'm reading along last night, and I had to reread it probably about 20 times to make sure I was not hallucinating. As Chinggis's first wife's father-in-law is stating how he was so happy about having this young, broad-shouldered, red-haired warrior as a son-in-law. What? I kind of tucked it aside, let it sit. Right before Matthew and I went on air, I looked into it. Yep. They always talk about the wise men came from the east. Through our understanding of history, yes, many had thought it was through the Persians, so forth and on down the line. I've done extensive tracing. Darius the Great's father studied under a Brahmin priest. Who was Zoroaster? Great deal of controversy with Zarathustra. I've come across references that tie him to the Scythian. Or the Scythian. Well, they find bodies up in Siberia of 6'6" men with blonde hair and blue eyes. Oh, by the way, they wear big pointy hats. Americas, you have this continual story about these blonde-haired, tall, blue-eyed, bearded men showing up. Yet somebody's led you to believe that they never knew about this place. Even though their own legends retain the same story. All of a sudden, in these steppe lands, within the last 10 years, they've uncovered just people that they never thought it was possible they penetrated into Asia. I've said this before. Doctors have to go back to school on a continual basis to be trained within the new scientific discoveries in medicine. Historians, especially those that teach the Bible from a historic level, you need to keep doing the same thing, because there's all kinds of new discoveries that have really shifted our understanding. We've had a huge puzzle put in front of us. I loved how David Rose said it the night that we had him on air. I love puzzles. I can relate to that. Pass it on. I got long-winded. I think I went in a different direction, but it all ties in. Folks, that's where we're going next. And it's going to bring us right to where we left off. Those kings of the East. You're on camera, Matthew.
Good. Good. Let me make myself perfectly clear. We've described to you tonight just exactly what's involved. America is the new world. It's 1/3 of this planet. It was originally inhabited by people from the same place Khan was from. Those are the people of the East. When you think about what I just said prophetically, and how, especially in our country, we, of course, suppressed the suppressor. Isochronal events just come into stark contrast. We'll probably do an entire episode on the kings of the East and show you the genetic studies of the mummies. We'll just prove it to you. I don't have time not to, so we will. We'll cover all that documentation so you can see it, see what God is doing. And it's amazing that we covered the two sides of his footstool that nobody covers tonight. We've covered the kings of the East and the New World. We've only talked about what no one else will talk about, when it's quite obvious that God did create the entire planet, and he had designs all over it. We've also given you tidbits about what we're probably going to do next. Who is it that stops the Assyrian? God is very clear that once he is utilized, his people, his place is wiped out by somebody. It's right there in the text. God has an axe. He also has a flail. And it's staring you right in the face in Bible prophecy. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you were edified. I hope you were biblified. As Christ is Brian and ours King, until next time, God bless, Godspeed. Matthew out.